background most of the time.
Okay.
I'd like to call to order the November 13th, 2023 City of Kanawha Winchester Planning and Zoning meeting. Mr. Ritchie, roll call, please.
Mr. Ritchie here. Mr. Wilthar.
Here.
Mr. Donahue.
Here.
Ms. Gooden.
Here.
Ms. McDonald.
Here.
Mr. Deeds.
Here.
Mr. Cosgrove.
Here.
Time in 7 o'clock. I'll now need the approval of our work session minutes from October.
So moved.
Second. Okay.
Motion made by Mr. Deeds, second by Mr. Paulsgrove. Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Wilthar.
Yes.
Mr. Donahue.
Yes.
Ms. Gooden.
Yes.
Ms. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Deeds.
Yes.
Mr. Cosgrove.
Yes.
I also need the approval of the October meeting minutes.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Willenthaler, second by Mr. Deeds. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Wilthar.
Yes.
Mr. Donahue.
Yes.
Ms. Gooden.
Yes.
Ms. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Deeds.
Yes.
Mr. Cosgrove.
Yes.
Now's the time for public comments. So if anybody's here to speak this evening for items that are not on our agenda this evening, this would be your time. If there's anybody that wishes to speak for items that are not on the agenda. All right. If you'll be speaking with us this evening, if there's any chance you'll talk to the commission, could you please stand and take an oath? So if there's any chance you're going to get up and talk, that includes members of the public. Do you swear to be truthful in the testimony you give and tell the truth and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do. Thank you. I will now turn it over to Steph.
The first item for discussion this evening is a sign permit appeal for property owner at 54 West Waterloo Street. They are appealing a sign permit issued by the Planning and Zoning Administrator regarding approved sign materials. The subject property, just for some background, is Old Town Commercial. It is located in the Old Town Overlay District at the corner of West Waterloo and Elm Street. It is a new coffee shop and wine bar that just opened up. The property owner is requesting an appeal to the approved sign permit for the signage on the building. Their appeal letter is up on the screen. They indicate they're appealing the decision to replace the original materials, and they'd like to preserve the original signage intent that was on that building. Up on the screen is the sign permit application. The conditions of the sign approval are in the lower right-hand corner circled in red. That the sign panels be wood or metal with a vinyl overlay. Those conditions are in two-part. One, when the applicant came to submit for the sign permit, staff asked what the sign panels were made out of. They were indicated to be made out of wood. Staff indicated that was a positive thing, as they could only be wood or metal based off our current sign code regulations. And that if the signage was to be modified or changed in any way, it would need to meet current regulations. So the code sections that are applicable are here in the Old Town Overlay District for signage. Section B says they shall be composed of metal, wood, or wood composite. And then beyond that, the Overlay District prohibits any internally illuminated signs. While the original design for the signage on the building was a cabinet box that was internally illuminated. You can see here as well the photographs and the stamp that says see application for conditions, which would reiterate the area circled in red here. After the signage was put up on the building, staff recognized that the sign was made out of a plastic PVC material. And then after talking to the applicant, they had upgraded the lighting inside of the sign to illuminate it. Staff had indicated that the conditions of the sign approval was it was to be made out of wood or metal, and that the indication what it was to be made out of wood. And again, just looking at kind of our sign code here for existing signs and continuance. Our code allows for existing signs to remain, and if codes changed, you're not required to upgrade your sign based off of the change in code. However, if the sign is reconstructed, altered, enlarged, extended, or relocated, it must meet current codes. So with the sign panel itself being altered for the new business information, that's what requires the sign to meet current regulations for it to be wood or metal. So the applicant's here to discuss the appeal with the commission. If there's any questions, our assistant law director is over there to kind of go through the process of how an appeal works, since they're appealing a planning and zoning administrator decision, so.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Please state your name and share what you wish to share.
Well, my name is Kim Stover, and obviously I'm here to talk about signs. Okay. Wow. First off, what's up there, I was the one that filled that out. Obviously, I signed it. I'm a small business owner. I'll tell you a little bit about myself real quick, and then I'm going to go into this thing. So, I've lived here in Canal for my whole life. Knock on 60. I lived in the same house for 20 years. I've had businesses in Canal. Used to own the Village Wines and Bistro. Sold it in 2016. Had another restaurant in Buckeye Lake. Sold it in 2018. Bought this old Rinaldi's building last year, July. Opened in August of this year. And that's where we are today. And that's the Giovino wine and coffee shop. So the signs that are there, and that sign right there, that material, there was a piece of wood over top of that when we bought the building. But that was there underneath the wood. And we just took that decal, or whatever you want to call it, and put that on there. So I didn't think that I wasn't in compliance until the other day when Andrew said you're not in compliance. So what I'm kind of asking is that I can keep them, because they go to that building, and they've been on that building. If you're from Canal, high school in Canal, you've seen those signs from Totem Pole to Rinaldi's to now Giovino's. And so I got a couple of things I want to say to hopefully you'll strongly consider so that I can keep them. And one of them is they're existing, and they've been there for decades. And we did not have a change of use for that building. It's always been a little pizza shop, and we're kind of a to-go place as well. And then the other thing is we're in the preservation district from my paperwork that I got from Andrew, preservation district. And they've been there forever. And thirdly, I would like to say that they are unique, and it is the downtown, and I think downtown is so charming. And when you look at Canal and you look at some of our developments in their, Westchester or Ashbrook or whatever, and they make them whatever, you pick a few different colors and houses and that's it. But downtown, drive down Trine Street or Mound Street, Columbus Street, and everything's different and beautiful, and the porches are cool, and the roof lines are different, and some people have a slate roof, and it's just different, unique, and charming. And I think those signs fit the building. They're existing. I think they're charming, and we do have a lot of new development with new signs that I'm sure are coming, but let's keep, I would like to say, I hope that you will let me keep something that's been there, and I guess that's all I really have to say.
Thank you. So, Mr. Shemp, if there's anything you would like to
Sure.
add?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think just sort of set the table. What the question before you is whether or not to affirm the decision of the zoning administrator. So that's Andrew's decision that the material isn't compliant with the current code and that the signs on the building have been altered. So in your deliberations, in your consideration, the motion should be, I move to affirm the decision of the plan or of the zoning administrator. And then if you vote yes to that, you are agreeing with Andrew's interpretation of our code. If you vote no to it, you are saying the applicant can keep the sign as it currently sits. I would just also caveat that if you were to vote in affirmation of Andrew's interpretation, that would not be the end of the road for the applicant. She could then just seek a variance through the city code to the provisions that Andrew has enforced upon the sign. So your question before you is Andrew's interpretation correct? The sign was altered, the materials are out of current code. feel free to discuss that. If you have any questions, I'm here.
I've got pictures of it when it was Rinaldi's. They're the same exact signs. It's the same materials.
So I guess I'll start.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Deeds.
So was there wood at some point in time on the sign? Because I actually lived across the street when it was Totem Pool, so it's been there for 45 years.
Thank you. I wish I had a picture. When we bought the building, they had put some protective wood over top, but what you see was, all we did was just take that down, and all that material was there. We did not put any new material in at all.
So changing the name of the organization, the business that happens to be there, does that consider an alteration to the sign?
So from looking at what the applicant submitted, showing it was a wood face on the sign, verbally saying when they filed the permit it was wood, to remove that and put up a new sign face, that's the alteration. It's the fact that a new face is going on the sign itself.
It
is
really
the
wasn't a new
alteration.
face. It was wood protecting it, and I did say that because as a small business owner, you wear a lot of hats, and I probably shouldn't have been the one filling out the paperwork. But what I was trying to say on that was we were going to change, obviously, the name. We didn't buy Rinaldi's business. We just bought the building, so we're putting a different,
Yeah.
So I guess I felt like that made it new, but in no way did we put up any new materials. Like I said, we took down that protective piece of wood, which I did tell you guys that was on there when I came in. So, I mean, if I need to do a new permit, I can do that.
What is meant by the vinyl overlay?
So typically, for businesses in the Old Town District, and I would say this is true for most of the signs in the Old Town District, is they'll get a sheet of aluminum, and then they'll have a sign company print a vinyl graphic, and as a big sticker, and overlay it on top of the sign panel, and that was what creates the branding and advertisements. So that is the typical process. You can do that with wood. It's just typically doesn't have as long of a shelf life depending on what type of signage it is. So typically they are metal, but with talking with the applicant, they were going to add graphics to that existing wood panel. So it was staff's understanding it was going to be applied to wood, but we allowed for it to be a metal material because that's what our code allows. So that's what the approval conditions are noting.
But with no change of use, why can't I keep them?
Mr. Stedman, just bear with us for 1 second. We'll have a couple more discussion here. So the decision by the zoning administrator here is that the sign, the white part that has the text, is a different material from the wood or metal, which appears to be some sort of plastic or what have you.
Correct.
And if we affirm this, if we make a motion to affirm this decision and we vote to approve or deny it, if we vote to approve, then the applicant can seek a variance through the Planning and Zoning Commission at a later date to have the current sign stay.
Correct.
Okay. So, I drove through the Old Town District today and looked at various signs, and, from the naked eye, it's hard to tell what some of these signs are made of, and I do appreciate the code, I think, and this is a question for staff. So, this section of the code, Andrew, chapter 1189, I believe. Or is this chapter 1175-01?
Correct.
Okay. When was this adopted?
It was adopted in 2019
Okay.
when the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council approved
What-
the overall changes to Chapter 1189, which is all signage. It
Okay.
included this revision or this amendment to the Old Town overlay to provide specific regulations for the overlay district as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Andrew, is there more to the application than what we see, or was the wood conversation a verbal conversation?
So the wood conversation was verbal. The applicant, what they applied for was this first page here. These following two subsequent pages. The third page was just a graphic of the logo, you know, what the contents of the sign would look like. It didn't have any indication, you know, what size it was, what material it was. The conversation about what the existing sign was made out of was a verbal conversation when the applicant dropped it off. And then staff stamped it while the applicant was there. They paid their $25 fee for the sign permit and left. It wasn't until the sign was erected was when the discrepancy was noted.
So I struggle in the preservation district to, if there's a way to show that it is the original materials, the original, what was there, what was intended to be there for the last 20-some years, of changing it because there was a wood protector over it. It just in my head, I'm like, I want to preserve what was there in the past. So pulling the wood off, if that, everything else is as it says it was, that's, I don't see that being altered. It's, I'm
That's what I asked.
Staff was not there when the wood protector was removed, so we don't know what was underneath. When Rinaldi's was there, their sign material was likely the same material as what is being used now. They did not have that sign internally illuminated. So that's one thing that I believe the applicant said the bulbs in it were specialty and damaged, so they had to get those replaced. I think what the applicant's saying though is you peeled the vinyl graphic off of this piece of plastic and reused the same plastic, correct?
This is the Rinaldi sign. This is my sign. It's the same sign.
And if the chairman is okay with it, you can distribute that to them. So
Yeah, please.
Is it actually the same vinyl, the same plastic underneath?
The piece of, I don't know which.
I'm sorry, Kim, can you go to the
Yeah,
mic?
can
just
you
so I
speak into
pick it
the
up
mic?
for the minutes?
I'm not sure if the material is acrylic or what the actual material
Yeah.
is, but what is there that you see was there when it said Rinaldi's on it. And Rinaldi's was a green and red sign, ours is just black and white. And there is some illumination behind there, but it's subtle, because they are old. I mean, they're vintage.
I'm just impressed the white is still white. I figured it'd be quite yellow by now.
Well, they have, it's underneath the eaves,
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So I drove by and looked at it, and I've only been in this community for a couple of years, so I don't have that historical knowledge of Rinaldi's or any of the other things. But in my experience with codes, I look at what we are doing today and what we are permitting today. And so when I review the notes from staff regarding the expectation that there was wood or they were going to use something that was more in line with the code, then I support that. If we said there's nothing illuminated in there, even though there were bulbs, if there was not anything illuminated for Rinaldi's, I don't know that there would be that expectation that it would be illuminated from inside. I believe that the staff has interpreted the code correctly. I do see where the applicant should have the opportunity to get a variance for her business to be able to continue to use the existing materials, the signage, those type of things. But my question for staff now is going to be, if someone else 3 doors down did the same thing, would we require them to have a variance to keep a sign that's been in existence for 40 years or whatever? So I'm torn in my thought process in that staff has has adhered to the code. That is what they're looking at. That's what they permitted, even though the reality of the sign turned out to be something different. But what is different was really consistent with what it's been for years. So in my mind, it's a little crazy. And so I turn to staff and say, if someone else down the street wanted to change out their sign, would we apply the same standards? Would we say to them, doesn't fit with the code today, and you would need to seek a variance if that's what you wanted to put in?
So if anybody in the Old Town District or in the community as a whole wanted to modify their signage, we would look at what current code permits, and that is what they would be allowed to do without any additional process through an appeal or a variance.
But if their current code does not, or their current sign doesn't meet the current code, is that what you mean?
Correct, yeah, so if the current sign doesn't meet current code and they want to modify it, then they would be bringing the property towards compliance. And they would need to modify the sign to be towards compliance.
So in this case, towards compliance means eliminating the illumination of the sign?
Would be, in this case, would be having the panel be a wood or metal overlay, which inherently also eliminates illumination, because you cannot illuminate a wood or metal sign in that manner.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
So, Andrew, if the applicant had told you at the beginning that they were going to use the basic sign that was there, including the white panel, would you have proposed to her that she get a variance?
Yes.
Any other discussion or questions for the property owner or applicant? So this would be a motion to affirm, and we would conduct a vote between the commissioners, and if they are yes votes and they carry, then the next step would be for her to work with staff to get on the agenda to seek a variance.
Correct.
Thank you. Anybody care to make a motion?
I will do that, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we affirm the decision of the administrator.
Okay, so anybody second?
Second.
So that motion was made by Ms. McDonald to affirm the decision made by the Planning and Zoning Administrator. It was seconded by Mr. Wildenthaler. Mr. Ritchie, roll call, please.
Mr. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Willenthaler?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Ms. Gooden?
No.
Ms. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Deeds?
No.
Mr. Paulsgrove?
Yes.
So the motion carries. So you'll need to work with staff after tonight to seek a variance. To
Take
keep
the
this up.
signs out of the preservation district.
And just because I like to tidy it up, I went the no route because just the extra bureaucracy to come back again for variance that we may very well support, so.
Ditto.
So.
All right. So next items on our agenda this evening are 5 applications for the Canal Winchester Local School District, and Mr. Britch, who's the applicant on behalf of the school district, has asked that these applications be tabled this evening and moved to the December agenda. So we will do one motion, if we could make one motion with these 5 variance request numbers in them, please, to table the application until December.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we table DA 23014, 015, 016, 017, and 019.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Wildenthaler, second by Ms. Gooden. Is that who that was? Roll call, please.
Mr. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Willenthaler?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Ms. Gooden?
Yes.
Ms. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Mr. Paulsgrove?
Yes.
The next application for tonight's discussion is conditional use 23-005. The address of the subject property is 304 Bowen Road. The request this evening is a conditional use to permit mini warehouses on the subject property. This subject property consists of 0.44 acres located on the west side of Bowen Road. The subject property is zoned general commercial. Property to the south is a Speedway Fuel Center zoned general commercial. To the west is a single-family home zoned general commercial. To the north is Hirsch Packing and Rubber zoned general commercial. And to the east, on the other side of Bowen Road, is a horse arena and barn zoned low-density residential. The applicant this evening is requesting a conditional use to Chapter 1167.03K to allow for mini warehouses to be on the subject property, in layman's terms for self-storage in the subject building. This is the existing structure that's on the property. It was constructed as a automobile car wash. That car wash has been closed for a number of years. It's changed hands with a number of owners that have had plans before the commission to do different things like automobile repair in it. Someone in the past used it as private storage where they put in the garage doors on it and used it for basically overflow space for their own personal things. The applicant this evening is requesting to turn the 4 garage bays here into 3 self-storage mini warehouses. When looking at the conditional use request in the general commercial zoning code, we require properties that want to go through a conditional use request for mini warehouses to have a site frontage of less than 150 feet. This property has 97 feet of frontage on Bowen Road, meeting that requirement. When looking at the other conditions, we look at if it's compatible with adjacent land uses and zoning, impacts on traffic flow and public services, destruction or loss of natural scenic features, and if the use will adversely affect the public health, safety, convenience, prosperity, and general welfare. When looking at the kind of street view of this property at the start of this presentation here, again, you can see it's an existing building with an existing improved lot in the front. That takes away some of the concern for destruction of natural scenic historic features. It's already developed site. When looking at some of the use for compatibility of adjacent land use, again, this structure was a former automobile car wash that had a much more intense use in terms of traffic flow, people using the egress to the property throughout all hours of the day. What the applicant is proposing is for this to be a 24/7 self-maintained self-storage facility. When looking at the site plan here, again, there are controlled garage doors that the tenants of the space will have a garage door opener to access the space whenever they wish. The application notes the property is to be unmanned. There's not to be a full-time staff person there. So the use of the property is very minor compared to what it was constructed as. As part of the application, the property owner is required to upgrade the property to meet current zoning standards. So as part of that, they are installing 4 parking stalls at the front of the building here. They are installing landscaping to screen the parking from the road. Parking's required just for that type of use, while the automobile parking for the car wash didn't really exist at the time of their construction, but they are meeting the current code requirements for the mini warehouse use. In addition to that, they are installing a dumpster gate screen door. There's currently screening on the dumpster enclosure in the back, but there's no door in the front. So just to bring that perspective up to current compliance as well, the applicant is doing that. One thing to note with the application here, again, there are garage doors on both sides of the building, so they would have the ability to actually pull through, possibly store something larger like an automobile inside. It's a self-serve car wash bay to give you an idea for the scale of the inside. Again, elevations provided by the applicant showing there are pull-through doors on either end that the tenants will have access to. And then the plan for the storage spaces, they'll have 2 smaller bays at 330 square feet on the one end of the building. Each of these will be a space for lease, and then a larger 674 square foot bay that has the demising wall in between it opened up to make it a larger space for lease. That demising wall has already been removed by a prior property owner. All these access doors had already been installed, so in terms of modifying the building for this proposed conditional use, there really is none. Again, it's just programming different garage door openers to different keys to lease space out to individuals. With that, staff is recommending that conditional use for the facility to be mini warehouse space be approved as presented.
Questions for staff?
Andrew, it looks like is there an updated lighting plan or anything? It looks like they're removing one of the masonry piers out front if you look at the aerial photo versus what the site drawing is.
Yeah, I believe that's an error on the plans. So prior to this current property owner wanting to use a space for this type of use, they were exploring an office tenant type use that had a higher demand for parking counts. And they actually were going to be removing the bays to do a full-fledged lot in the front. And so I think the site plan is just carrying over one of the lights being removed. I think the applicant's here to answer that question if one will be removed, but I don't think that's the intent.
Is it a shared drive with the house and the other property behind it?
It is, yeah. So there is an easement that's been recorded for the shared access drive. The access drive was constructed by the car wash, so they're the ones that have received the easement from that lot to the south. They have majority of the access drive that the easement's being obtained from. But the car wash property owner maintains all the asphalt all the way down to the property line.
Any other questions? Is the applicant present? Please, if there's anything you wish to add, if you could sign in, please.
I just want to try to get something out of the building. I want to use it for something. I bought it to make it into an office, and by the time I priced it all out, I couldn't afford it. So I just want to try to at least rent out some space inside to make some money off of it. And I'll do whatever they tell me to do, cleaning-wise, whatever you guys need.
Thank you. We'll now open it up for public comment on this application, if there's anybody that wishes to speak on this particular application.
Mr. Chairman, I move we close.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Ritchie, second by Ms. McDonald. Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Willenthaler?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Ms. Gooden?
Yes.
Ms. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Mr. Paulsgrove?
Yes.
Motion to approve conditional use CU 20-005. I'm sorry, CU-23-005.
Second. Motion made by Mr. Deeds, second by Mr. Paulsgrove. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Willenthaler?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Ms. Gooden?
Yes.
Ms. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Mr. Paulsgrove?
Yes.
Conditional use is approved.
The next application for tonight's agenda is variance 23-013. The address of the subject property is 625 West Waterloo Street. It is this vacant 6.7 acres starred on the map. The request this evening is a variance to chapter 1167.04B1 to exceed the maximum building height. The subject property is 6.7 acres on the south side of West Waterloo Street. It is zoned general commercial. The parcel is a later addition to the Waterloo Crossing Shopping Center. That's the shopping center that has the kind of Walmart facility as the anchor. Properties to the east, north, and west consist of other commercially zoned properties with active development or land for sale for future redevelopment. Property to the south is the Charleston Lake Condominium Community Zone Multifamily. The applicant this evening is requesting a variance to construct a new 3-story medical office building and emergency room for Ohio Health. The proposed building is approximately 40,000 square feet. It is shown in the northwest corner of the site. Kind of going through the site plan here prepared by the applicant, you can see the building kind of highlighted in pink. They have an area planned for a possible future expansion just to the west of that. separating the kind of building area from the parking area is a existing high-pressure gas main that has a easement kind of boxed in around it. And then again, the parking just south of that. The applicants, and here's a better graphic kind of showing the gas line easement in addition to the existing building, the proposed building location and future potential expansion location. The applicant is requesting to construct a new 3-story medical office building. This building is shown to be 47 feet 4 inches tall to the top of the parapet wall. This graphic here is kind of hard to see, but if you look at the main roof height here on the right-hand side, the top of the deck for the roof is at 43 feet, and then the top of the parapet wall on the tower feature on this one end is at 47 feet 4 inches. The applicant is requesting that variance. Our current code puts a maximum height at 40 feet for a 3-story building. When looking at, I'll go back to this graphic, it's a little easier to see. When looking at recent variances that have been approved for exceeding the building height, Hampton Inn in 2017 was permitted to construct a 4-story building at 51.8 feet tall. So that exceeds the number of floors and the total height by 11.8 feet. In 2019, Fairfield Inn was permitted to construct a new 4-story building at 57 feet tall. So that's 17 feet taller than the max permitted at 4 stories in height. When looking at the special circumstances and conditions for the subject property, staff had noted again that there's that existing gas high transmission line that runs parallel through the site. This gas transmission line does limit the building footprint location. The applicant has proposed a building that fits within these existing site constraints, to have a building that meets our build to line requirements to front the street, parking located behind the building, and because of those existing conditions and the building footprint they needed to construct for the project, the building floor plate at 3 foot tall needs to have that additional height to handle all the additional equipment that happens kind of behind the scenes between the drop ceiling and the top of deck. That's unique for that type of user. When looking at the literal interpretation for the code, if it would deprive applicants of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties, the literal interpretation of the code again would have the building maxed out at 2 stories. That would basically be based on the floor plate height that the applicant needs for the additional mechanical rooms that take up each floor. In addition, the high gas transmission line and parking needs kind of facilitate how the site lays out in general, forcing that building location. When looking at the special conditions and circumstances, if they're resulted by actions of the applicant, the site layout constraints with the gas main existed already. The applicant did not put those in, and the applicant again is working to the best of their ability to maximize the layout for the property, really create what they're calling the campus product for this facility. Granting this variance will not confer any undue privilege that is denied by the zoning code. Again, similar variance requests have been granted for other building uses that have requirements for specific floor plate sizes. Again, this applicant's looking to do a 3-story building, as some of the others were 4-story buildings that were slightly taller than what the applicant's requesting this evening. And that granting this variance would not adversely affect the public health, safety, comforts, prosperity, and general welfare. The addition of an emergency room user in this location would greatly enhance the healthcare access to residents of the greater area of the community, and in fact improves the public health, safety, convenience, comfort, and general welfare just based off of the use that they're requesting. Granting this variance does not show this property could be put to better economic use. It's zoned general commercial. This use is permitted whether or not this variance is granted. When flipping through some of the conceptuals the applicant has put together, they did some excellent perspective renderings for the commission to take a look at. Up on the screen you can see the newly constructed Right Pac Credit Union with some fancy software. They put in the building that they're proposing at the height they're requesting here, this kind of shadow box. You can kind of see Walmart here in the background just for some context. Looking at it from a different angle, you could see Hampton Inn here in the background, right Pat, another angle of this building. Again, this is an approximate kind of location of how this building will sit in relation to the street, in addition to the height. And you can see Walmart here again, just for context in the back. When looking at the kind of property as a whole, this is kind of that same corner where the building's going to sit. The existing Charleston Lakes community, for reference, does have some extensive mounding and evergreen trees that was planted as part of that community's development to kind of help buffer it with the anticipation that the properties around it were zoned general commercial. We require that there's that landscape buffer for multifamily and general commercial, and either route, if you're the multifamily going against commercial or commercial going against multifamily. So this is kind of what that community put in for their development. You'll see in the subsequent application what Ohio Health is doing for their buffer screening in their full site development plan proposal. But I think this street view here is important just when talking about building height and kind of how that project plays into the existing neighborhood. So with that, staff is recommending that variance application VA 23-013 be approved as presented.
Any questions for staff? Anything, is the applicant present? Anything they wish to add? Come on up. If you could just state your name and sign in, sir.
Sure. Aaron Hieronymus with Ohio Health. Ohio Health is excited to be in the community. I think everything Andrew summarized is accurate. The high pressure gas main is fun to work around. So we wouldn't want to, if it weren't there, building would likely be positioned differently. But I think it's the best of both worlds. Andrew also mentioned, because of what the building is, it just merits higher floor-to-floor heights than you would traditionally have in other types of construction. So all of those factors play into why this building height is presented as it is.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant on this application? So this is a variance request and does have a public hearing. So there will not be a public hearing in the site development plan. So if there's anybody that wishes to speak on this application, now is your time. You can come to the podium and sign in and state your name, and we'll give you 4 minutes. I'll kindly interrupt at 3 minutes, letting you know you have 1 minute remaining.
My name is Joe Bittler. I live at 6651 Lakeview Circle, and it's part of the Charleston Lakes community. My concern, first off, I want to welcome you to the community. Thank you. It's fun to have good neighbors. My concern, as Andrew mentioned, also about the what Charleston Lakes has done as far as putting a buffer zone in with the pine trees and the hedges and the land above between any commercial development site. And you alluded to the fact, and I believe that Ohio Health is also going to be doing some landscaping or fencing for that, but I didn't hear any explanation of that.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in the next application.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Now is your chance.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Dees, is that second by Mr. Paulsgrove? Roll call, please.
Mr. Ritchie? Yes. Mr. Willendorf?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Ms. Gooden?
Yes.
Ms. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Mr. Paulsgrove?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I move to grant variance 23-013.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Gooden, second by Mr. Deeds. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Ritchie? Yes. Mr. Willendorf?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Ms. Gooden?
Yes.
Ms. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Mr. Paulsgrove?
Yes. Variance 23013 has been approved. The next application for tonight's agenda is Site Development Plan 23007. Same location at 625 West Waterloo Street. This is a site development plan to approve the 40,000 square foot Ohio Health Medical Office Building and Emergency Department. Kind of skipping over surrounding zoning and land uses. Again, the request this evening is to construct a new 40,000 square feet medical office and emergency department building. The site plans that have been presented this evening show the building location, parking lot layout, landscaping, lighting, floor plans, and interior elevations. All I'm going to go over in the presentation this evening. When looking at the existing conditions for the property, as it was kind of previously noted, but there is a 50-foot existing transmission gas line easement that runs parallel throughout the property. I'm essentially cutting it in half. There is an existing curb cut on West Waterloo Street that is going to be utilized for the development here. And then plans for the Waterloo Crossing Shopping Center show the second access into the site lines up with the one on the opposite side of the parcel. When looking at the plans proposed by the applicant, they are meeting the setbacks and build-to lines for the property. This property does have a 25-foot build-to line with a 0 to 15-foot variation based off a 3-story design. The applicant is meeting that. They do have a little dashed line in here that shows the build-to zone variation, and then the 25-foot setback here showing the building is within that scope for the project. When looking at parking and access, again, the parking is located completely to the rear of the building. The access drive uses the existing curb cut on West Waterloo Street, ties in for the plans for the shopping center to the west. And then the applicant is proposing a total of 183 parking stalls, meeting code requirements for a minimum of 181. When looking at pedestrian access, the applicant is showing a sidewalk that will connect the main entry at the rear down to the west property line, where you can cross the street and actually walk on a sidewalk up Wright Pat to West Waterloo, as well as a sidewalk connection that will follow the eastern access drive to the shared sidewalk existing already on West Waterloo Street. This graphic is really kind of muddled here, but the applicant is showing that they have access to water and sewer along West Waterloo Street at the front, and that they are adequately planning for stormwater detention on the site. This site shares detention with a regional basin located behind Walmart. So during civil engineering review, we will look at the storm calcs, make sure everything was accounted for in that design, and that they are planning appropriately for the corridor plans in our code. The applicant has put together an extensive landscape plan for the project. They are required to plant 66 trees based on the number of parking stalls and the square footage of the building. The applicant is showing 66 trees on the proposed plans. The urban forester has looked at this extensive list here and has confirmed that they're meeting our tree species requirements, our diversity requirements, and also the quantity requirements. Just for some kind of reference here, the applicant is proposing some smaller decorative trees along the frontage here on West Waterloo, some larger trees within the kind of front landscape islands, trees within the parking lot islands, and then showing 33 differentiating evergreen trees to screen the south property line from the Charleston Lake community. The applicant did a good job as well of noting what the existing trees were and where they are located, so you can kind of see that double stack of evergreen plantings that the applicant put in there to be sensitive to the neighbors to the south. The applicant has put together a lighting plan. You have a very extensive version of this one boring slide in your packet to look at. Take away 25-foot tall poles
the decorative bell fixture that matches most of the corridor. Photometric plan shows no spillover on any property lines. And then this really fun black graphic at the bottom shows the photometric lumens. This is actually the dimmest parking lot lighting we have in all of the whole shopping corridor, with a maximum of 2.5 foot candles at pavement. For reference, our maximum is 20. I think like Walmart has a 19 foot candle, rating. Wright Pack Credit Union is about 17, so this will be drastically different visually from everything else around it. Again, part of them trying to be good neighbors with the existing residents around them. And this graphic really shows kind of like the heat map of the whole parcel to give you context of this beautiful image here. When looking at some of the elevations the applicant has proposed, you can't make it out here, but I promise you can see it in your packets. If you want to flip to those pages, the applicant is showing a breakdown of materials across all 4 elevations of the building. They are showing the building is predominantly made out of a red brick that matches the brick spec for the shopping plaza. They are showing some stone windowsills on all 4 elevations, some metal awnings on the sides and rear of the building that get the sunlight that warrant the awnings. Stone that is similar to other stone within the corridor, some window treatments, some frosting of window glass, and then also a detail for the parapet wall that's screening the rooftop mechanicals on top of the building. The applicant has also provided floor plans in here that shows what each floor breakdown is and how the space is being used. So most of the first floor is the emergency room department. There are some administrative offices that go along with that in the corner of the building here. But as you work your way to the second and third floor, it's being programmed as outpatient facilities. They will have some vacant space that could be programmed in the future. This space has been accounted for in their parking calcs. They just don't have what type of medical use is going in the space yet on the second floor and again on the third floor. But just to show you kind of the orientation with the stairwells on either end of the building, the main elevator on the west side. Looking at the rooftop here, my red box here is just showing the limits of that rooftop parapet wall. So it's not extending all the way to the end of the mechanical equipment. It's actually being contained within this red box around the building here. The elevations do note that that parapet wall to screen the mechanicals is nearly 11.5 feet tall. They have some 10, 11 foot tall rooftop mechanical equipment on the building. So the height is dictated to screen the tallest units within that. But this is just to show it's offset and kind of pushed in between the building. Some of the perspective 3D renderings kind of show better perspective of what that scale looks like. So here's some of the 3D renderings that were put together by the applicant to show different treatments of materials around the building, different brick treatments on certain areas of the first floor with different stacking techniques, different applications for stone details, some of the stone kind of floor plate delineations as well. This graphic staff requested to kind of help explain what all these things were on the first elevation sheet. So you can see here the shopping center red brick being used, some of the stone, the ledge stone detail, again the metal panels, cast stone for the lintels, the frosted glass they'd like to use in some of the more sensitive areas of the emergency room windows that are on the first floor facing West Waterloo Street, and then details for the rooftop mechanical screening. And then this same panel system is being used on the dumpster and generator screening, just to tie that building material in. You can kind of see that in this rendition in the corner. Staff is recommending that site development plan SDP 23007 be approved as presented. They are meeting all of our commercial overlay development standards, our general commercial development standards, parking, landscaping, all with the exception for the building height variance that you guys just approved. If there's any questions for me, I'd be glad to help answer. The applicant's here to answer any specifics you have for them.
Questions for staff?
Andrew, if I read this correctly, the parking poles, the light poles can be a maximum of 30 feet under our code, and theirs are only 25?
Correct.
So that attribute, or helps with the lowered illumination, or exactly how you phrase that?
It's between that and actually the number of poles they're putting in. The applicant can speak to the exact number. If you look at the landscape plan, I believe the landscape plan shows a previous lighting layout. So you can see there are a number of poles throughout the parking lot, but then if you scroll back to kind of what they turned in as the final result in the site plan, they've reduced the number of poles and the number of heads on those fixtures, and the way that the fixtures are shaped, and then the lighting ballast up in them all attribute to the lighting levels they're requesting.
Thank you.
I have a comment. I know that the plan conforms with the size of the stalls for each of the parking areas at 19 by 18. Is there a reason why we never asked for 10 by 20? Because cars aren't getting any smaller, and that smaller footprint makes it very difficult for people to park, especially if they're coming into a hospital situation. That's my first comment. And I know our code says that they can do it the smaller amount, but.
So that's right. Our code does have a minimum of a 9 by 18 for a parking stall. You know, in the future, when we ever want to do a revision to our code or parking section, that's something we could visit, is changing that standard. I know Violet Township, theirs is a 10 by 20 is their minimum. And then I know Columbus is a 8 by 18. So I think it just varies depending on, you know, where you go. Ours has been a 9 by 18, I think, since the mid-90s. So that's something that could be warranted to be revisited during a future code update.
It's just really hard to park in there. My second comment really is about the sidewalks. I know that in your presentation you said there would be a sidewalk and it would go across the street and it would match up with Wright Pat Credit Union. My concern is the walkability of the people coming to this facility to Walmart and the other stores that are up in the Walmart Plaza. And I'm not seeing that there's actually a safe way for them to traverse up to that location. So I'm not sure if that's something we handle here or we look at from another perspective, but I am concerned about safe walking to the Walmart.
So the only area where there is not a walk connection, because it's not shown great on this plan, but there's an existing sidewalk along West Waterloo already. They are connecting it. That will lead through their site to the front entrance here and down out this direction, if you're following my mouse. The only area where there is not a walk would be on this western property bounds leading from here to the north. I'm not sure if it's to retain these 5 trees that exist, basically the only trees on the property that exist. But then when you look at their proposed landscape plan, they're adding some here, so I don't know if there was an issue with that, but that's something the applicant could answer if that's your question.
So the question really is, how do you get across the street to Wright Pat Credit Union, how do you get to Walmart? Without going through the parking lot?
There's no defined crosswalk or defined walking path that leads you to the front door of Walmart.
Okay.
If that's what you're asking.
That is what I'm asking.
It doesn't exist. And so we've required sidewalks on the private drive of all the developments from Chipotle down as they've developed. So there's still one gap there in the vacant lot. But that roadway has sidewalk all the way down it, with the exception of that, which will be filled in when it's developed. But there's nothing to get you to basically the front door of Walmart.
So I'm not asking this development to do that. I'm just bringing that to your attention because I think that is a safety issue that I would like at some point to be able to rectify. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments for staff?
A question, Andrew, you mentioned a front entrance, but that's actually a west entrance, is that right? There's no entrance off on Waterloo proper?
There is no public entrance off of Waterloo proper. They have a private staff break entrance that's right around where this kind of patio leads into. They want their public entry to be one single access point in that west corner, the southwest corner. We require an entry on the building facing Waterloo, but it doesn't have to be a public entry. So they're using it as the employee door. It's really to put a door facing.
There's also emergency access there too.
Yes, yeah, and then along the frontage here, let me get to the right plan sheet. So this is the staff break room entrance I was talking about that has the patio. There's also an emergency exit just based off egress on the opposite side of the building. Those will have walks that will lead around the building, but it's not the intention for the public to enter into that side of the building.
And with the exception of the ambulance bay, all of the entrance is the single door?
There is a controlled access point in that southwest corner, yes. That leads to the main vestibule area. Yeah, the ambulance entrance over here on the southeast side is not a public entrance either.
Any other questions for staff? The applicant wish to add anything? Okay. So we need a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve SDP 23-007.
Second. Motion made by Mr. Ritchie, second by Mr. Paulsgrove. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Willendar.
Yes.
Mr. Donahue.
Yes.
Ms. Gooden.
Yes.
Ms. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Tees.
Yes.
Deeds. Mr. Paulsgrove.
Yes.
Site Development Plan 23-007 is approved.
The next application is Final Development Plan 23002. The owner is Dale and Teresa Schott. The applicant is Matthew Gaston of North Point Development. The location is 5681 Bixby Road. They're requesting a final development plan for Canal Crossing Industrial Development Phase 2. The plan before you considers an industrial development for 3 buildings. And so this plan was zoned with the planned industrial district with ordinance 22016. The initial plan laid out 2 buildings. What they're proposing now is a 3-building plan. In terms of adjacent properties, the properties to the north are in the city of Columbus and in Madison Township. They're zoned LC4, which is a commercial and multifamily district in the city of Columbus. Rural in Madison Township. Properties to the east are in Canal Winchester and zoned LM, which is limited manufacturing. And properties to the south and the east are in Madison Township and zoned rural, or they're the US 33 right-of-way. This application did receive a previous approval of a final development plan in 2022. That plan included 2 speculative industrial buildings, one that was 540,000 square feet and one that was 528,000 square feet, so a total of 1,068,000 square feet. The plan's now been revised to include the 3 speculative buildings, 2 of which are 263,000 and 1 of which is 435,000 for a total of 961,000 square feet. So there's a reduction in the overall lot coverage and density with the revised plan. The development text for this property that was set with a PID lays out the standards for the proposed development. The applicant is meeting all of the standards of the text. There is one modification of the text, and that is in regards to the building orientation section of that text. That states that the building shall initially be placed on the site in accordance with a master plan dated on January 14th, 2022. So what they're doing is basically changing that line of text to associate it with this new development plan with a new date. And so our code allows you to make modifications to the development text as long as you're not changing the overall character or intent of the development and you're not changing the density as was approved. And so with this modification, you know, it's up to the commission to determine if it's a minor modification that does not increase the overall density of the site or change the essential character of the approved plans. All other text is remaining as was approved by ordinance 22016, and the applicant is meeting all of the development standards. Those development standards include building heights must be, or building setbacks must be 75 feet from any road right-of-way. The proposed buildings are all set back in excess of 75 feet. The building height's limited to 50 feet. And the applicant is meeting that with a maximum height proposed at 50 feet, and that all sides of the building visible from the public right-of-way be broken up by architectural design elements and colored in natural tones. And again, we'll review the architecture of the building, but they're meeting those requirements as well. In terms of the proposed site plan, the site has 2 access points on Bixby Road. One between Building 4 and Building 5 that will serve the western buildings and will serve the loading dock areas of Building 4, which is the middle building. And then there's another access point to serve the automobile traffic between Buildings 3 and 4, which are the 2 smaller buildings, and that will serve for the access for customers, employees that are using that kind of that central parking area within there. There's also an access point proposed on Reger Road, and that would serve as the main truck access point for that easternmost building to serve as their access point into that loading dock area. The access points, the westernmost is located approximately 2,000 feet east of US 33. It would be beyond any limited access if a future interchange were to be constructed there. So ODOT is currently evaluating that location for an interchange. They're working on environmental studies and preliminary engineering for that, but this would be beyond the point where they would have limited access, which is going to be limited to 1,500 feet within the location of the interchange. And so we've consulted with ODOT on the location for that, and they found that to be an acceptable location outside of that limited access area. The second access point is located approximately 550 feet away from that access point and 560 feet away from Reger Road. The minimum spacing requirements for access points in our thoroughfare plan is 400 feet. So these are all in excess of the minimum spacing requirements that would be required along that thoroughfare. The applicant did update the traffic study, and there is a decrease of approximately 100,000 square feet in the size of the buildings. They based the traffic counts on the square footage for trip generation, so the trip generation actually goes down from the previous traffic study. So there's less demand in terms of traffic generated by this development with the reduction in the building square footage. So the traffic study has been reviewed and found to be acceptable with the trip generation as presented. As part of the approval of ordinance 22016, there are a number of conditions set for traffic improvements. I'll review those with the commission so they understand the commitments that have been made, and the developer is still proposing to make the improvements as were approved in the initial traffic study and by ordinance. There's no change in that, even though the trip generation is less than what was previously proposed. So this shows there are 5 main improvements that the applicant will be making with the application. Project A is a Bixby Road widening. B is Bixby Road and Winchester Pike improvements at the intersection. Winchester Pike and Gender Road improvements. Reger Road, closing that north of US 33 and making that into a cul-de-sac, as well as updating the roadway width to meet current public standards on Reger Road. And the last is a new right turn lane from westbound US 33 to turn onto Bixby Road. And so there's approximately 3,000 linear feet of Bixby Road that we widened to 28 feet. So that is two 12-foot travel lanes and a 2-foot shoulder on each side. It'll match what was done with the first phase of the project, so buildings 1 and 2. That is a mix of Canal Winchester roadway and Madison Township roadway. And so that'll have to meet the standards for both Canal Winchester, and the Franklin County engineer will review on behalf of Madison Township. With the annexation, this tree line you see to the north here, that is the boundary. And so everything to the east of that tree line is in Canal Winchester. Everything to the west of that tree line is in Madison Township. So that's the kind of the dividing line for Bixby Road in terms of who controls that roadway. The Project B at Winchester Pike and Bixby Road, the applicant is proposing putting in a right turn lane from Bixby Road to head eastbound on Winchester Pike. This is the primary movement that truck traffic's making currently to get back to the interchange. And so there was a need based on current traffic there, and what we would see is increased traffic from the existing development and this proposed development that would require that. So that right-hand turn lane would be installed. And you can see there's a reduction in the delay at that intersection from 34.5 seconds to 30.6 seconds by installing that right decel lane. The next is the improvements at Winchester Pike and Gender Road. So this is an intersection that's in the city of Columbus. There's been an extensive safety study that's been done throughout that corridor. Columbus has just completed that study, and they're evaluating projects through this corridor currently. Since this approval, Columbus has actually proposed another project that would relocate this intersection to the north. And so their preferred alternative would relocate this intersection just to the north of Waffle House and relocate Winchester Pike to the north of Waffle House. So the city of Columbus has right-of-way there currently, and that would be their preferred project. This intersection would stay an intersection, a signalized intersection. It's just Winchester Pike would be cut off into a cul-de-sac and wouldn't travel through to the existing Winchester Pike just to the west of this image that you're seeing. So there would be two different traffic signals there, one at Winchester Lakes Boulevard where it intersects with Gender Road. That would be the new Winchester Pike as you head west from Gender Road. The applicant has agreed to contribute $500,000 towards the improvements that Columbus has proposed there. The city of Canal Winchester has required other developers to contribute, so Sheetz has contributed to the intersection improvements there. We've required other developers through rezoning processes to contribute. Those projects haven't moved forward, so they haven't contributed yet. And the city of Columbus is requiring the development on the southeast corner of this intersection to contribute to that project as well. And so timing, at the earliest anything would happen with any of these improvements would be 2030. Based on Columbus's outlook and trying to get attributable funding established there. So earliest improvements would take place as 2030, but we require that funding be put in place now and put into an escrow fund, and we would hold those funds until Columbus is ready to let that project out. The next is improvements at Rega Road and US 33. And so we're seeing safety concerns currently with people making left turns, especially truck traffic making left turns from US 33 to head northbound onto Rega Road. So the trucks are dwelling in that short kind of crossover area and hanging out into the roadway, the traveling public. So that's something we definitely want to correct. North Point's going to assist with that, with closing this intersection north of 33, so south of 33, Rega Road would remain open to get to Dills and to the south. This would just be the north side of that intersection. It would be removing the roadway there and installing a cul-de-sac. That is right-of-way currently, so there's no additional right-of-way that needs to be required. It's already owned by Franklin County, and so it would allow them to construct that and keep the same driveway location to serve the church that's located there. And then the last is a right-hand turn lane from US 33 to Bixby Road. So that would be installed, that would result in safer turning movements for vehicles that are making that movement from US 33 to Bixby. It's kind of a sharp, kind of acute angle, so it improves that. It will also help improve the visibility for people that are trying to make the right-hand turn from Bixby Road to head towards Columbus as well. So again, those were all conditions of the rezoning, and the applicant is meeting all those conditions with the proposal. In terms of parking on the site, the applicant has proposed 132, well, the text sets it at 2,000 square feet for each, one parking space for each 2,000 square foot of building. The applicant is meeting the parking in all buildings. The proposed plan requires 132 spaces for buildings 3 and 4. The applicant is providing 256 spaces for building 3 and 266 spaces for building 4. So again, much higher parking counts. That is the result of this being smaller buildings, more kind of the flex office warehouse type tenants that will usually locate there. There's usually a higher parking demand for those types of buildings. So the applicant is proposing, nearly double the parking of what we require in the code, but there should be adequate parking in that central kind of parking courtyard with the parking that they've installed along the north property line there, along Bixby Road. And that setback mirrors the setback for the existing buildings and parking layout. So it'll keep that same look with buildings 3 and 4 in terms of the building setback. The building heights are very similar, and the setbacks of the parking in the buildings are similar, so to keep that same look that currently exists in that corridor. Building 5 is required to have 218 spaces. They're proposing 261 spaces on that site. So again, meeting the minimum parking standards. The drive aisles and parking space dimensions meet all our requirements of the code. In this code section and a number of our industrial developments, we've granted variances for driveway width because we have a maximum driveway width in this text. We wrote the maximum driveway width at 36 feet. And so they're meeting that with this proposal. Our typical code section is 25, so we often get requests for variances with industrial because they need to exceed that to allow truck turning radiuses, but that's not an issue with what's proposed here. In terms of landscaping and lighting, there's an extensive landscaping plan. The applicant is required by the zoning text to have mounding and landscaping and a fence along US 33 that would screen any loading areas from the public right-of-way. Any loading areas or trailer parking. This is a pretty busy grading plan here, but what it shows you is that mounding requirement is met around the site. So the whole western building is surrounded by a mound that would exceed that 8 feet of average height. And that includes some areas here along this southeast corner of the site that would screen this loading area from the view shed of US 33. This is a landscaped mound that also includes a 5-foot fence on the top. This would be very similar to what was just installed near Canal Point. It's the exact same fence design, same detail, same landscaping, same mound height. So that'll give you a feel for what that looks like from what you can see from US 33. They did a sound wall on part of that, but that mounding height and fencing design is the same that you will see on this development. And again, here you can see the landscaping requirements, the landscaping plan that they've put together there. The applicant's proposal shows more than 650 trees are proposed throughout the site. The code requires 380 trees for building and parking areas, so the applicant's far exceeding those requirements. A lot of that's driven by the mounding, requiring that to be a landscape mound because there's so much mounding on this site that really drives up the number of trees that the applicant is planting. But that was something that was important to council and the public as we went through that approval process to try to make sure that we had a well landscaped site that would mature and provide that screening as this site went over time. Many of the people commented on some of the larger industrial buildings in Groveport that were developed 20 plus years ago and how well landscaped those are currently. So they will get there in maturity over time. So well exceeding the requirements for landscaping in this area. They're also including hedgerows to screen any of the parking for the vehicle parking along the Bixby Road frontage, as well as along the Rager Road frontage. So the hedgerow requirements will be in place there, and 1 tree for every 40 feet to meet our code requirements. In terms of lighting, this is a detail of that crossbuck style fence. So it's that same black fence that you see along US 33 currently. In terms of lighting, the applicant is proposing 30-foot poles with a maximum intensity of 20-foot candles. So this meets the code requirements in terms of intensity, lighting height. There is a requirement that these can't be exposed wall pack fixtures. So what they're proposing, you see here, these are LED fixtures that you would typically see in a parking lot. Those are the same type of fixtures, they're just not post mounted that they mount on the walls. So a full cutoff fixture shining down. There was a desire of council when they adopted this legislation to not have the exposed wall pack shining out because of the height that these lights are mounted. So they're full cutoff fixtures basically shining down the building onto the parking lot, and you can see those in the red locations on the building. Those are the wall mounted fixtures. And then you'll have some parking lot lighting proposed as well in the parking lot poles. In terms of utilities, the applicant has an 8-inch water main that's proposed to be installed here along the south side of buildings 3 and 4. That would extend from Rager Road, where those utilities currently exist, between buildings 4 and 5, and that would serve the site here. There's also private water lines that run around the buildings to serve for their hydrants and for their fire protection systems. There's an 8-inch sanitary sewer that would extend from Rager Road, where it currently exists, again along the south sides of building 4 and 5. In between these buildings, there is a desire to extend that to the north to be able to further serve the properties to the north of this, which are in the city of Canal Winchester. And so the city will be working with the applicant on doing that as well. And that'll extend to a 15-inch gravity sewer that currently exists here along Rager Road. Stormwater for the site is going to be handled in a detention basin along the south side of the site. And so it's along US 33 between the church and buildings 3 and 4. There's also a detention pond that will be constructed on the opposite side of Rager Road. And so the applicant developed those sites as well, and so they'll be developing an additional pond that's north of the overhead power transmission lines. And so a pond will be installed there, as well as the pond on site that will serve the stormwater needs of all of the development. All in the development text, there is a requirement that the detention ponds include the use of fountains for irrigation. So any of the ponds there will have a fountain installed to make sure that they are well maintained and don't breed mosquitoes and algae and all the things that come with the ponds that are not well aerated. The development text requires that all facades of the buildings visible from the public right-of-way be broken up with architectural design elements. It also requires that the buildings be compatible in similar materials and similar colors. And so the applicant is proposing a color scheme very similar to the 2 buildings that exist on Bixby Road currently. So it'd be very similar in color. Materials are concrete, so concrete tilt-up walls, the same what exists there. What is included is a significant amount more window glass. So you can see this is the top is the south elevation, so this would be what faces US 33. This would be for the smaller buildings, buildings 3 and 4. So you can see significant window glass in the areas that would be, finished likely as office areas of those buildings. So it gives a little more frontage, a little better front door to the buildings that would be visible from US 33. And again, even with the higher glass that would be visible behind any of the mounds and things that are located along there. These elevations would be visible to that central parking area between the 2 buildings. And so you can see those are broken up with kind of the storefront systems that would be for the various tenants that they could demise these spaces into. And when you're looking at the larger building, you could see the north and the south elevation is a cross dock building, which means it has loading docks on both the north and the south side. Again, that's why the mounds kind of screen those areas from public view on the north and the south side. But the west elevation, there was a desire to enhance the architecture on that west elevation. So you can see the west elevation includes significant storefront systems, window glass, sunshades to kind of dress up and give that a little more architectural detail than you would typically see on most industrial buildings. And again, the east elevation has the same type of storefront systems, they just don't have the upper window glass that you would see over those mounding areas. So staff has reviewed the plans and feels that they comply with all the development text and preliminary plan. The minor modification of the preliminary plan from a 2 to 3 building configuration does not increase the overall density of the site or change the essential character of the plan. The site meets the requirements set forth in the approved development text. Staff recommends conditional approval of FDP 23002 with the following conditions. One, that the roadway improvements specified in the ordinance 22016 be completed prior to final occupancy of any building. That the applicant improves Reger Road from Bixby Road south to the proposed access point to current public roadway standards, with the roadway being accepted prior to building occupancy. And 3, that the additional 7.3 acres of road right-of-way be dedicated along the Bixby Road and Reger Road frontage as shown on the concept plan in A10 of the traffic study, and that be completed prior to occupancy. So the applicant has agreed to donate additional right-of-way along Bixby Road, which would allow for its future widening beyond the 28-foot configuration. If an interchange were to be installed there, we would want to take that to a 5-lane roadway, just due to the volumes of traffic, and the right-of-way that they would donate would allow us to accommodate that in the future. And then they would donate essentially the site of the existing farmhouse and farm, and that would be donated to contribute to any future interchange improvements that would happen there. Be happy to answer any questions you have, and the applicant is present as well.
So, Mr. Hare, when you say in your recommendation that the roadway improvements specified in ordinance 22016 prior to any occupancy of any building, do you mean permitting of occupancy by the city?
Correct. So it would be, we issue a certificate of occupancy when they're ready to occupy the buildings. And so the roadway improvements would need to be complete and accepted prior to them being issued a certificate of occupancy, which would allow them to operate in the building.
Okay.
So
Any other
key,
commit? Go ahead.
A key word there is final.
Yeah.
So difference between temporary occupancy and final. Temporary occupancies could be paid for.
So is the commission comfortable with staff's wording of those recommendations?
Mm-hmm.
Final occupancy of any building versus, do we need the word permitting in there, or is that just, am I being too specific?
It could be a 6-month differential depending on what's going on and what else has to happen between the 10th and the final when you get in. There could be a time there.
And these 3 recommendations cover what's laid out to the degree that we have control over it in the city of Canal Winchester.
Correct.
Sorry, wasn't 2 included in 1? Or there was an actual separate?
It's separate because the ordinance didn't specify Reger Road widening.
Got it.
And so this would require the widening of Reger Road to meet the current public standards since it's going to be used for truck traffic.
Is there any reason condition D on that traffic study of just closing that road, we can't do it Jersey barriers now?
It's not our roadway because the area from the church's north property line down is in the township, and it's also, ODOT has limited access with that right of way, so it would be an ODOT requirement. We have talked to them about that, and they would like to work with the applicant with North Point to do that, but they have a public process they need to go through to solicit public comment and feedback. They have to post notice, so there's a number of requirements they need to do to close that. But yeah, we've asked for that for the last 2 years.
Any other questions for staff? Is there anything the applicant wishes to add?
Matt Gasson, North Point Development. Lucas gave my presentation, so I don't really.
Is there anything you want to?
Well, There's only one thing that I know we had talked briefly about,
On the left-hand side, just make sure it's on green to turn it on. Like turn the remote to the side, and you'll see an on-off switch.
there we go. I know we had talked, I know we had talked to some people on the planning board about trying to do a shared truck court, and I wish I could do it because it's a lot cheaper. But talking to everybody kind of in the market and in the real estate community, you know, having these separate truck courts is really important for, you know, larger companies, and it's already kind of playing out right now with two tenants we're talking to, is having secure truck courts is really important, especially for different light manufacturers, assemblies, and logistics companies. So when you have a shared truck court, you have no control over. You can't put a gate up, you can't secure any materials that you might have to have within your premises. So that was the biggest feedback, and it's just not as desired of a building. So unfortunately, this is the plan that was given. Kind of you'll be very successful in this market, especially when you demise down to smaller spaces, which we're seeing a lot of demand for, is smaller users. And Lucas knows that just from buildings you guys have here in Canal. So that's the one thing that I just wanted to mention, because I know we talked about it and mentioned it, but unfortunately, it would save a lot of money, but we might not lease the buildings. So, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to.
Any questions?
Yes, when we were talking about some options with this and how to break it into the threes, I think the thing that, you know, hearing the feedback from the community about just a bunch of warehouses, it's like if we could vary the color slightly. We talked about some slight color variations so that they all didn't look the same, because if they all look the same, it's going to like one warehouse clear down that whole area. So if you could, I don't know, if you do different shades of tan, different shades of gray, alternate, you can probably get some pastels in there if you really want to get creative. But I think if you just add some different color variations, that would give it just a slight enough perspective that it look, oh, a bunch of small buildings there versus one large warehouse.
I do think that these two small ones will look a lot different than the ones just to the east of there, and then we can look for a different color scheme for the third building.
Any other questions or comments for the applicant?
The only comment is, you're seeing it all across the city of the 500,000 square foot warehouses are sitting vacant.
Oh, yeah.
New Albany's got a couple million square foot up there sitting vacant right now.
That's why we're switching.
These smaller warehouses and the amount of windows, you're getting a lot more people coming in looking for the office space, or the small, really small manufacturers are coming in doing little widgets.
Yeah.
So it's a much more appealing space, so.
I think ultimately the west side will be broken up again, but right now, just as we see that as a great build-to-suit spot for, there's a lot of manufacturing companies looking for spaces in the area, and I think this is a very desirable location. So to maintain as big of a footprint as we can right now, just to propose to different users, gives us the greatest flexibility to land a quality tenant.
Would you have any concern with that option one when we were talking about changing that final occupancy of building to temporary occupancy of building? Before you move in that building, we'd like to see these roadway improvements done.
Yeah, I guess the trickiest thing is, as you know, some of these tenants build outs can be really long, and then, you know, you could bleed into winter and you not be able, I mean, the goal is to have everything done at the same time. So just seeing that time, if we had to do temporary, it might be a little tricky, but I think, yeah, we would feel most comfortable with fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Hare, these recommendations and the staff's recommendation, those 1 and 2 come from ordinance, from the PID at ordinance 22016, is that correct?
Yes, 1 does, 2 does not.
2 does not.
2 specific to this plan with the access point that's proposed on Rager Road and where it's proposed.
All right.
So is that contingent upon the township for Franklin County?
No, the full roadway is in Canal Winchester. It's just from the church. The church's north property line to the south is not our right of way. That's still the township roadway.
Got it. So they could do the
But to the access
but they
point
just
to the
can't.
north is all City of Canal Winchester roadway.
So they could do the widening, they just can't do the turnaround and dead ending of the road.
Correct. So that's required as part of condition number 1, that they do that, but they'll just have to work with ODOT and the county on that aspect of the project in terms of permitting.
Maybe to help, I think what you're asking, condition number 1 includes the cul-de-sac.
That's my
Condition
concern.
number 2 is widen this area where my mouse is going. Condition number 1 from the ordinance did not talk about improving this first 2/3 stretch. So that's what condition number 2 is to improve the first 2/3 stretch.
Got it.
That's why it's different.
All right, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we approve final development plan 23-002, including the 3 conditions that are laid out in the staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McDonald, second by Ms. Gooden. Any other further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Willenthaler?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Ms. Gooden?
Yes.
Ms. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Mr. Posgrove?
Yes.
So site development plan, or final development plan, FDP 23002 is approved.
Last application for tonight's agenda is zoning map amendment 23001. The location of the subject property is 48.66 acres located at the corner of Hill and Basil Western Road. Parcel number 042041220. The request this evening is to rezone the property from exceptional use to limited manufacturing. This subject parcel was annexed to the City of Canal Winchester in 2021. During the time of annexation, there was a proposed zoning for a planned industrial district that was applied for at that time. The applicant that was going to develop on the property decided not to move forward with that project during the annexation portion. So the zoning did not go through. City Council elected to keep it exceptional use, while the annexation went through for the parcels that you could see kind of in this swath on the screen. The exceptional use zoning district is, for reference, is a holding category that is placed on newly annexed parcels that don't have a development plan put in place. The EU district allows for the property to continue to be used as it was prior to annexation. In this case, this property can be used as a commercial business, this can be used as a residential home, and the rest can be farmed. If anybody wants to develop on the properties in any different of a manner, they have to go through the rezoning process. The applicant is looking to rezone the properties to LM for this main 48.6 acre kind of U-shaped piece to allow for a kind of shovel-ready site for future development in the corridor. This property was zoned limited manufacturing in Violet Township prior to its annexation to Canal Winchester. With the rezoning application, the applicant has put together their packet for the Commission's review. They have a letter noting that the property's prior use was limited manufacturing in Violet Township. And they've also provided some conceptual site plans, traffic information, as well as just general information on how the property could be developed, meeting our code standards. What makes this application a little different for the commission that was here reviewing the plan district portion is they don't have a specific plan put in place because they don't have a developer ready to build something, so they're just showing conceptually how you could build on it. At the time when someone wants to develop on the property, they will come back before the Planning and Zoning Commission with a site development plan proposal that will show all the different various regions of our zoning text are being met. As part of the applicant's submittal, they have provided a copy of the future land use map draft from the community plan for reference for the request for rezoning. The piece they want to rezone is this basic shape here on the drawing. That and the draft plan that is at City Council right now for their public review and feedback is indicated as industrial campus. When looking at the corridor down Basil Western Road, you can see that it is all in that industrial campus zoning. I think the applicant's going to talk about this a little bit more detail, but when looking at the current plans Violet Township is doing for their projects, they are approving final development plans and plan districts for large industrial development, similar to the previous application that was discussed up on Bixby Road. So this property owner wants to be able to advertise this property as ready for industrial development to follow suit. This corridor is part of a traffic improvement plan with Fairfield County engineers. The City of Canal Winchester and the property owner have entered in an MOU and design stage to look at future roadway improvements. This kind of graphic up on the screen just shows a conceptual view of how traffic can maneuver throughout this industrial park. The applicant has shown some industrial development that is being, these two boxes have been approved by Violet Township for development. They are reviewing something similar on the south side. Those that travel up down 33, DHL's building is underway. To kind of get an idea of how this corridor is actively being developed. This improvement plan has created an intergovernmental agreement to work on funding for these improvements at Basil Western Road. Part of that includes a new roundabout concept for Kings Crossing and Hill Road. You'll be able to see that on some other slides. But as part of that, any development within this area will contribute funds towards these roadway improvements. So in the future, when someone wants to develop on this property, they would follow that same suit. This portion of the application, again, is just showing a kind of context for the corridor and how all those funds are adding up to complete the project. One of the prior applications for this property that went before Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council was for this 496,000 square foot building. Again, if you take a look at kind of a concept of how the site could be developed, adding some of the roundabout roadway improvements, you start to see how that impacts how the parcel gets developed, how it would impact access in and around the site. So the applicant has provided this as an example of how a plan like this could be modified to something like this top right corner that developer put together to show how they can incorporate some of these roadway improvements. Again, this graphic from another project shows some of the improvements here and how these kind of main points are being impacted through development. Again, showing how you can do these roadway improvements along with building something on the parcel. And then, again, just showing how there is kind of a deviation between the property and how it could be developed in the future. These plans, again, are recycled from other projects. This is not what the applicant's proposing. It is showing, however, that the zoning for the LM district would allow for something of this type of use. But again, the scale and maneuverability would be modified based off of actual improvements. Staff has reviewed the zoning amendment and the compatibility with sections A through D. Kind of just briefly going through those. The compatibility of the proposed amendment to adjacent land use is compatible with the use happening in Violet Township with the current industrial park that is being developed along the corridor. Again, the cooperative economic development area would help contribute towards improving this corridor. This area, even with the zoning to the limited manufacturing zoning district, would apply the CETA development standards. The CETA standards are an additional set of criteria that is above and beyond our LM zoning that both Violet Township and City of Canal Winchester both have to meet. So the projects within the corridor will have some similarities and some assimilation between them. When looking again at the access of traffic flow, utility services, water, sewer, and storm, the proposed use again would necessitate improvements at Kings Crossing and Hill Road intersections that are currently underway. The existing agency funds that we have with Meyer will improve some of Hill Road that is currently unimproved. The roundabout component again. The MOU that is part of the Fairfield County TID is looking specifically at Basil Western Road and the roundabout. That roundabout design is assessed at nearly a $3 million project that is having funds towards. When looking at the amendment for public health, safety, convenience, and comfort, again, the surrounding uses are a mix of industrial uses, small commercial uses, older housing stock that's being transitioned out as development comes through. The projects within this corridor will contribute a minimum of $1.50 per square foot of the building square footage towards future roadway improvements. So that dollar figure is set for any future development on this parcel, including if it's just a straight LM zoning, and that the services to the area are available with utilities. So staff is recommending that the rezoning from EU to LM be approved, be recommended to City Council for approval. If there's any questions about some of the finer details from the commission, we've got to help answer. The applicant has a presentation they would like to make as well, just kind of going over some of the finer points for their proposal.
Any questions for staff?
Good evening, commission members and staff. Richard Ricketts, Ricketts Co. LPA, 11520 Pickerington Road, Pickerington, Ohio 43147. I am co-counsel for the applicants, Weiser Development. Also present with me this evening are Matt Schwartz as co-counsel, and also we have Todd Weiser on behalf of Weiser Development. Andrew does a nice job of going through a great number of things, so you've got a lot of the information behind you, but to put some more context into everything and why we're seeking approval of this application, let me go through a few exhibits. And the one that's in front of you right now gives you kind of a big picture of what we call the Basel Western Corridor. And if you look at the Basel Western Corridor, we've all known that that was going to develop. And if you look at the green, which is marked with a W, 49 acres, that is the Weiser site, which is the application in front of you this evening. Just to the right of it in blue is the property that is owned by Lloyd Helber. That is in Violet Township, and that's the so-called Hemmer project, as you may know it, that has been approved and moving forward. And as Andrew indicated, there's a couple buildings that have been approved by Violet Township of comparable nature on that property. The property to the north in yellow is the Thornton property. The Thornton property was recently purchased by Lloyd Helber, and so you now have that property, which is currently also in an EU zoning category. And then you also have the additional property to the right, which is the L, and that's another Lloyd Helber property. Both of those properties being in Canal Winchester and being in the EU district. As Andrew indicated, there is also a project across from the blue Hemmer site going through in Violet Township, which is comparable in design and in character. And you also have the DHL site down in the Amana Northern Road that is moving forward, and you can see what that looks like. So that gives you a bit of a context of everything. But what's probably more important about all of this is the efforts that is being ongoing between Canal Winchester, Violet Township, and Fairfield County to be able to do a much better job of trying to pick up the cost of improving the roadways and being able to provide for the developability of the property. So for example, you've got the TID, you've got the CRA going through Viola Township and Fairfield County, and you have the TIFs and all the things that are moving through that are Fairfield County and Viola Township oriented, but Canal Winchester has input in all of those things. But this all rolls together because of effectively the Kings Crossing intersection. And we all know that we need to do a better job of being able to have connectivity between Kings Crossing and Basel Western Road, and that's a very major cost. And that was candidly one of the things that caused problems with prior developers on this site, was simply the cost to be able to put in that roundabout that was being contemplated. Now, as a part of this program with Fairfield County, that will all be paid for as a part of the TID. And right now we're moving through and we're having agreements that are being worked on. Fairfield County engineer actually has a viewing scheduled for next month that was going to be going on this property to, in other words, to move forward to enhance the TID and everything that is going forward with Canal Winchester. And that project will come up with a concept plan that will ultimately be what is approved and put in place by virtue of the funding of the TID. Now, the next drawing that I wanted to go through with you is, if you see in black, that is the Weiser property. The importance of this diagram is the dark yellow lines. Those are the 3 high-pressure gas lines that go across this area. And as you can see, the one high-pressure gas line significantly impacts the development of a lot of the acres within Canal Winchester, and especially the Weiser site, because if you are going to have effectively the north side and the south side. And so when you're looking at this, not that the market would even move you towards the larger buildings, but effectively the existence of the gas line moves you towards what the market is driving right now, which is the smaller buildings by virtue of being able to work around the gas lines. This drawing is actually one of Canal Winchester's options in terms of the roundabout and relocation and alignment of Basel Western Road. This was overlaid on one of Opus's original plans where they had a cross-dock building. As you know, the market is not really driving cross-dock buildings these days, and it is more likely that this project will end up with 1 building to the north and 2 buildings to the south of the high-pressure gas line. But that is one of the options that would be looked at in terms of the realignment and connectivity of Basel Western and Kings Crossing. The next one is a variation of that, also one of Canal Winchester's hypothetical options and conceptual drawings. The importance of all of this goes back to not just simply that this is going to be paid for by the TID and the contributions of the developers of the site, but also that we really need to try to move this project forward to overlay the concept of the developers with Fairfield County and Canal Winchester and Viola Township to say what is the best layout of the roads. And to be able to do that, we believe that by virtue of having the LM zoning, we're going to be able to drive much closer to being able to get parties to the table to say, here is a site plan that works and this is how the road layout would work. And also very important to Fairfield County and everyone else is if there is more development on this site, there is more funding to take care of the TID, and it becomes a TID that is very successful, which then allows everyone to be able to move forward with similar projects. This is just the timetable of the Fairfield County Engineer's Office and moving forward. It is consistent with what Andrew already talked about, and in essence says that they want to try to have a design roughly in the next 10 months, which is one of the reasons why we want to try to move things forward as aggressively as we can with a potential developer of this site. This shows a concept of how the property could be developed. Again, you can see where the high pressure gas lines are. This was the Opus original projection for the property. And they did have one big cross-dock building, and then they had one smaller building that was on the north side of the high-pressure gas line. The next drawing was a proposal by another developer that came in, and this one is probably more likely what you're going to see, other than the roadway concept here is not going to likely be acceptable. But this shows that there will be likely 2 smaller buildings or potentially even 3 smaller buildings on the south side of the high-pressure gas line, simply driven by the market. If you look at everything in this area, I think you will see that given the comprehensive plan that hopefully will be approved by council, this is consistent with everything that is moving forward and is contemplated in this area, and it also will allow the Wisers with a better opportunity to be able to move the project forward as a productive effort within Canal Winchester going forward. One of the things that I think is very important for us to note, and just as you saw that the Ohio Health proposal and or the North Point proposal, you still have all of those site plans. You still have to go through, in this case, all the CETA approvals. There is so much more that a developer has to go through to get final approval to develop the site, but getting the LM zoning is significant because now a developer knows that they can move forward and spend the money on the site plans and not be subject to a potential referendum on whether or not they're going to be able to have their zoning. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have, but would also ask that you give due consideration to supporting this project.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Ricketts. I will now open this up for public comment. If there's anybody from the public that wishes to speak on this application.
Mr. Chairman, see none, I move a close.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Ritchie, second by Mr. Deeds. Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Wildethauer?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Ms. Gooden?
Yes.
Ms. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Mr. Cosgrove?
Yes.
So again, this is a zoning map amendment, and this would be a recommendation to City Council for consideration and approval.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to propose that we move ZM-23-001 forward to move for approval and forward to council.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Deeds, second by Mr. Wildenthaler. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Wildethauer?
Yes.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Ms. Gooden?
Yes.
Ms. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Deeds?
Yes.
Mr. Cosgrove?
Yes.
In terms of old and new business, I will notify the property owner for the Jovino project tomorrow, the next steps that they want to seek a variance process. I know they wanted to start with this appeal because it was a faster process to immediately get on the agenda rather than immediately waiting to December. So I will walk her through that, see if that's something she wants to pursue. With other old and new business, I do have some P&Z appointments that expire at the December of this year. Mr. Ritchie, your 4-year term, Mr. Paulsgrove, the term you were finishing, and Ms. Gooden, the term you were finishing. If you want to stick around and let me know what your thoughts are, so we can plan accordingly for the next 4 years after this meeting, that'd be much appreciated. Other than that, for old new business,
The comprehensive plan is moving through the council approval process, so they had their first reading, last meeting on the 6th of November. So that's going to the second reading for the second meeting in November, and then it'll be moving towards adoption sometime in December.
and then if anybody wants to see the most up-to-date version of that final draft, it's on the CW Growing Together website. There were some comments from the steering committee and council for some cleanup of the document. No major changes or by any means, but if you want to stay up to beat on what those changes were, you can take a look at that. I have a brief synopsis memo sheet I could send you if you can't figure out, what's missing, which is probably a good thing, right? So, other than that, I don't really have anything else. It's been a late meeting tonight, so any questions for me?
Did the school ask for a postponement because they weren't able to have someone here this evening, or?
Yes, the representative for the schools had a conflict. He wasn't able to attend tonight. He wanted to be here for the discussion, so he asked for it to be moved to December.
Okay.
And do you expect the library in December?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I move we close.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Wildar.
Yes.
Ms. Donahue.
Yes.
Ms. Gooden.
Yes.
Ms. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Deeds.
Yes.
Mr. Paulsville.
Yes.
Timeout 8:59 PM.
Jim Bridge.